Since everyone liked the other one, they were asking, what do you do for a hydraulic? The other one was solid. I'll do one for hydraulic. This is for Magnum and LA. There's a little difference between the two, slightly, and we'll get to that in a second. It'll be on step number coming up. This is going to be for Brian at Dust Devil Garage. And this is going to be a triple crown engine, not this year, but probably for 2026. So obviously things take time and cost money, so we're doing it this year. So come along and see what it takes to make these things run and survive with hydraulic lifters. Step number one on this is, just like before, we're going to drill the mains. We're going to check the mains here. Typically, Magnums come a lot better than LAs, and I know this is controversial, but it's the truth. They come right off the bat a little better machined than the LAs did. One area is even right here. So LAs come starting at a 930 seconds, and you got to finish up drilling them, and that comes out to, like we said before, 0.0621 inches squared. Magnums, however, come with a 5/16. That comes out to 0.0767 inches squared, which is 19% better right off the bat. Also, too, typically, this one right here was already set up. I mean, it already went all the way through. There's a couple of them here that didn't go through, like this one right here. It stops right about there. Now, yeah, right there is where it stops. Sorry. So you still got to clean them up, but it's a much bigger drill bit. It's 5/16 on these if you're going to be doing this exact same engine. But these processes will work also too with an LA. Just use the 930 seconds. And on this one, we're actually going to drill 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 holes, because we're going to be using this as a hydraulic. So you're going to be doing the number one coming from the passenger side and the driver's side, passenger side, passenger side, passenger side, all 5/16. Step number one, drill all the holes. Get yourself a little piece of tape, make yourself a little stop so that way you know. To be fair, only 3 of these holes just basically had to get just a little bit of bust through to make it through. The one that comes over here to the driver's side was completely clear. But that one feeding that, and the number 1, the number 2, and the number 3, I had to basically, it was just a slight little breakthrough. So, advantage Magnum so far. Advantage Magnum, because like I said, 5/16 right out of the bat. The next step is to remove all the factory plugs. Looks like Brian kind of already stripped this one down. I was able to see through everything. But that one in there is still in there. But luckily on the Magnums, they're not the plug like you see in the early 318s and the 360s. These are just basically, they're just little freeze plugs type of deal. So they're really easy to come out. Typically, any 5/16 steel rod that you can get at your local hardware store, you put them in there, and then if you just tap it a few times, you'll get this. Here's Mr. Plug. This is the plug that you're going to get, and then once you get that out, then you're good to go. So now that that's open, we're going to move on to the next step. The next step is going to be drilling out everything to 1/2 inch in the back of the block so that way we can feed it. Typically on Magnums, they're already got, most of them are 1/2 inch already. The one that we had to drill out before, 1/2 inch, this is already done. And you can see that that comes in there right there. So that's good. 1/2 inch there. This here, feeding up, is already 1/2 inch, but they never ever seem to finish it. If you can see it right there, drill bit is just barely poking through. So you got to finish drilling that into that area. That's important because that's going to be that's the main tube that runs down, and we're going to be tapping off of that. And then, just like before, going down into this one right here, that is definitely not 1/2 inch. That is much, much smaller than even the LA ones. Why they do that, I don't know. But that's the one that comes out. So that is after it goes through, back into the filter, back through, and then going back into the block. So this is feeding from the pump, going to the filter. This is after it's filtered, it goes into here, back over. So I've got hole number 1 done. Hole number 2 was already done. Hole number 3 is done in there. You can see it coming through. Now, on the Magnums, however, where they come in from here, this hole here, that comes from the filter going to this hole, typically what I do on those is see how it's barely drilled over. And before on the LA, we were able to drill it to 1/2 inch. Well, on this one, we can actually drill them much bigger. This is a 2332. It's the size needed drilling for a 1/2 inch MPT. So we're going to drill in from here, and then that way it kind of helps out because you're going to have a 90-degree turn here and a 90-degree turn there, making that hole that transfers much bigger than it needs to be, helps that out. And that way you can kind of come in here and with that and then do just a little bit of cleanup on that, and it makes it much easier. So what you're looking for is to get it so that way the tip of the drill just gets right to the edge right there. So that way it gets to that. Once again, get yourself a guide. It's going to help because as you go through there, it's going to want to walk. As you go through this area right in here, it's going to want to just keep grabbing and grabbing and grabbing and twisting on you. But having that definitely helps. The hole that we just drilled, 1/2 inch MPT, you're going to basically drill that in to right where that stop is that you kind of marked from last time, or that I marked from last time, or get yourself a little plug and just get a little test fit because you're going to want to get at least half the threads, at least 4 or 5 threads is good enough. For me, that's going to be right about there, and you'll start to see it just pop through there as it gets through to the right size. Okay, but that's where I normally like to be. Now, this step where I drilled this, I want to be clear with this 100%. Not all LA engines can be drilled out to this size. Sometimes the casting is shifted. Not all of them are as thick like the Magnums in this area. So use your discretion. On this next step, we're going to be doing some crossover tubes. Notice how I said tubes. Okay, so this is where it gets controversial. Okay, so a lot of people, they can pick up here or they pick up right here and they run a crossover pipe to here. That is okay. Anything that you do as far as getting oil from this side to this side without having to go through the number 1 main here is better than nothing. So just know that. How I'm going to do it, you're not solving a problem, or fixing it. You're just kind of, making it a little better. Here's how you solve the problem. Since before, this oil that comes down through this is the main oil galley. Since now we've drilled all the way up to here with a 1/2 inch, and it comes all the way up here, we're going to come off of this. So that way we're not taking any of the oil that's coming down this, because if you pick it up right over here, it's still high velocity right in here. Even though this pipe is not being used, it's still high velocity here because you have a lot of different, you're having all these lifters now leaking oil. So instead of that one leaking oil, and then on the number 4 and the number 2 that feed up here, now you're pumping up throughout all these. So you created a much, much bigger, let's call it leak, because now you've already got 8 leaks on this side, plus the mains. So this oil that's coming up this passageway, coming from the number 1 here, is just screaming fast. So it's hard to feed this one. Plus, coming from the number 4 is now screaming fast. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do just like I did on the solid one, is I come off of this tower, and this is where it gets controversial. I come in to right here. This is the number, or right between the number 1 and 3. I come straight down in there. I run a copper pipe. And then I'll take a pipe and run it from here, and I run it back to over here. The reason for this is an equalization tube. Since I'm putting high pressure oil coming from here to here at a high pressure and a high volume that is basically untouched, I'm basically filling this whole side up. The reason for the crossover pipe is that, or the equalization pipe, is so that way the number 1 main is not your equalization. That way you're not sending fluid through that. Fluid is only going there now to be used. It's not being used to transport fluid back and forth. We're going to go from this one to this one right here. So between number 5 and 7 to right up here in front. And then we're going to come from right here to right back there. Okay? Here's a nice little tip when you're doing this one. Get the engine flat and level. And then what I do is I use the edge and line it up at the center of the hole. I mark a line. Then I offset the line slightly. And that gives you a nice little spot. So you can get an idea of how far you got to drill on that one. So there's plenty of room to go to quarter inch NPT here, quarter inch NPT there, and that's going to be 1/8 inch, and that's going to be 1/8 inch NPT. The reason why I go to quarter inch NPT on the Magnums and here is because there's plenty of material here. Even on the LA, I've had plenty of material here for the quarter inch NPT. That's going to allow a much bigger volume of fluid to come from here to there, at least 315 thousandths of diameter, which is pretty good. So that's already drilled, and that's already drilled. So then I'm going to step them up, and then I'm going to go to the drill size for the 1/8 inch MPT, and then I believe this one and that one are going to get 7/16. Okay, next up. So that one's to size 7/16. That one's for 1/8 inch. And this is the tricky one. You got to get this at the right angle. What I tend to do is I tend to get it set up on right there on that hump, and it's at a slight angle like that. And you're coming in to it right there. So you're coming into it as dead straight as you can be. Because remember, this is now normally when you do an 1/8 inch pipe on this one, when you do the solid, this is totally easy. But on this one, you need volume because you're trying to feed this thing with a ton of volume. So it's got to be 7/16. So that way we can put a quarter inch NPT, quarter inch NPT, 1/8 and 1/8. All right, let's get to tapping. When you're all done tapping them, they should, and putting the pieces in, they should look something like this. And that one should be kind of pointing towards this one. So what I do is I normally come out, put a slight kink in it, put another kink in it here, and then dip in. And then that's why I'm going to put the spider cage on top. And if you notice here, I'm just barely tipping through on that hole, and I'm not coming through on any of these holes. There's a lot more meat on the Magnums than there are. Now in the LAs, you can see I'm just barely starting to come in on that one, which is totally fine because it's the only volume that's getting used on just a sending unit right here. So this will tell you true pressure now. The LAs, you got plenty of material here. These get a little thin. This is the only one that on the LAs I would check to see how straight this is drilled, because sometimes the quarter NPT you can't always do in the LAs, but the Magnums is not an issue. I've never had a problem. They seem to be drilled straighter here, and if you wanted, you could actually drill and tap this to a if you wanted to put a quarter inch NPT in this. So we're going to put the cage on this thing, and then we're going to start bending some lines. But this is what it should look like. Here's a nice little tip. When you're doing these, do the 90 degree here, the main feed first. Obviously, it's not going to perfectly line up. But that way you can kind of cut it just beyond this part right here. And then kind of get it to the angle that it needs to be. And then you cut this piece down to get to the right height. And then that way, when you're done, you can put it in there, in that piece, and then drop it straight on down. And we're going to do this one first. Then we're going to do this one here. So I got the first one in. This one kind of comes over, runs along here, goes straight in there. This one right here, I'm going to see if you notice that this one is lower right there. So this is going to come up and go over this one, and then go over here and hit that one. So it's going to come over and go over like that. That's the plan. Sometimes I can bend this down. That's why I tighten these up. I'll bend that down and get this up and over that. But you're not trying to go too high because you're trying to stay below that. So that's why I bring that side down and go up and over. Okay, next bend. This one comes from here over to here, and this is the equalization tube. See, there's just a little bit of clearance there. And yeah. Now, I already know it's controversial, whatever. You don't need to do this. Well, this is just what I do. I'm just showing you what I do. I like the equalization tube, so that way, once again, maybe third or fourth time I'm saying this, so that way I'm not using this as my equalization tube. This is my equalization tube. This now is just to get oil down to this number one main cam and the number one rod. And I'm backfeeding it through here. Do you have to do it out of hard line? No. You could do this out of -6, and this could be a -4 or whatever. I just do it out of this because, once again, this is to show you how you can do it with just household and hardware parts. And this is what I used to do back in the 90s to get these things to survive. I couldn't afford the Earls. At that time, it was only Earls, so I did it this way. Next thing we're going to do is unshroud this. We're not going crazy. We're not trying to cut in crazy amount. All we're trying to do is just open this up. So take this hump out right here and then just roll this edge. So just make a bigger opening right there. So that way we can just kind of get rid of some of those things. That's it. One more thing, what I typically use is just a cutter like this, carbide cutter. Just kind of get it in there like that. And just cut that out. And then I'm going to come back in with a roller and just smooth it out. It's a really simple deal. This is the final product. This is all you're trying to do is just get it so that way it kind of gets in there. And this is the tool I use to smooth it out after I grind it. It's a really simple deal. This is a really easy step. It can be skipped. I do it because it's kind of my feel-good moment. I feel better because that's there. Yeah! Next step we're going to be doing is we're going to be cutting slots in here because remember, these are 5/16 and the bearing hole's only 1/4 inch. So what I do on the 360s is on the smaller journal ones like the 318 and the 340, I do it at 3/8. On this one, I do 1/2 inch, a little bigger bearing. So I mark them out from the center. I go out. And the reason why I do this is 5/16 comes out to 0.077 inches squared. And on these here, I'm able to do 7/64. So on these 4 right here, 1/4 plus 4 of these 7/64 comes out to 0.086 inches squared. So once again, we don't want the bearing shell to be the restrictor. We're going to make the crankshaft, the actual bearing surface, the restrictor. So that way it's not just being restricted by this hole. So we're trying to flow as much oil as we can to that area. So what I'll do is I'm going to drill them from this way down onto these, right onto those holes. And then I just basically put a chamfer on the back here. And then once I do that, I'm going to mark the holes inside here and then just cut them. After you drill the holes, get yourself a nice little chamfering tool like this. And then just hit the back side of them. Just knock the burr off. You don't want to use a file on this because you don't want to change the shape of it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to set these in here. Like so. And then we're going to take a Sharpie. And then we're going to mark there, 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 and there. And then once you mark that with a Sharpie, then you run a Sharpie line through there. And then we're going to come in and then just put a little grind in there. That way we have a guide to get to this and get to that. We're not going super deep because remember, the holes are only 7/64. So you don't go very deep. You just basically cut a line to it. It's going to make the oil get there. Put the bearings in. Use the holes as a guide. Now on the 360s, because I was able to make a bigger hole, because the bearing is different than the other ones, you can use a Sharpie before I describe it. But then you can just run a line from there to the next. And as long as you cut along that line right there, you're going to be golden. Just cut right on that line anywhere and you'll be fine because all you got to do is just get it to the dot. This is what you're trying to achieve. Just a nice little groove. Nothing crazy. Go a little deeper right here on the edge and bring it out. This is about 100 thousandths deep. Very little. And remember, they don't always line up because that's why we cut the bearings first and then lined them up so that way you can see how they go. And this one here, you don't have to cut much at all. I cut this a little deeper here just to kind of get some groove into it. But that's what you're looking for. And we're going to put these in just a second. And I'll show you the finished product. So this is the number 1 bearing. You You can see the groove right underneath there, and that's all you're trying to achieve. It's just a little tiny gap, so that way it can get in there, and just a little tiny gap right in there. So all you're trying to do is just to fill this up. Very last step is we're going to do some oil pump modifications, and then we're going to modify the pad to match this. Typically, we're just going to do a gasket match port job. Gasket match. See, on this one right here is very little, and then once we drill this hole out right there to 1/2 inch, number 5 main, we typically have to drill out to 1/2 inch. If you have an LA, you're going to have to drill this out to 1/2 inch, and it's a straight drill. Where on a Magnum, it's already been drilled. It's already 1/2 inch to begin with. But on a Magnum, if you notice, it goes at a little corner. So that's 1/2 inch, that's 1/2 inch. The only thing I do is I tend to come in here and I do a little blending in that little corner right there, and to cut down on that little sharp angle right there. There's the finished product. So all you're trying to do is just get rid of that edge right there and smooth out that corner. This is already 1/2 inch, so we're just going to match that hole to that hole. And then what we do on this here is we do another gasket match port job. We just mark that with Sharpie, and we're going to clean this out. Nothing crazy. We're just going to take this edge down to help bend the oil into this area a little easier. That's all we're going to do is just take this down, this down. The Magnums are much easier than the LAs. There's a lot less work to do. So now we got the oil pump apart, and this is why I always say, always check new parts. It has nothing to do with the parts that have gotten crappier. It's just people don't check anything anymore. This right here is cast iron. Every single pump that I've ever taken apart has always had some sort of cast iron inside of it. So yeah, this right here would have gone into your filter. That is true, but cast iron's a very hard substance. If it gets through the media, that's going right to your bearings. So always, always, always take apart your oil pump, blueprint your oil pump. What we're going to do in here is once we drill this hole bigger, it's going to pop out in here. Then right down there at the bottom, see how that restricted opening? We're just going to clean that up. We're not going to take this edge down because that edge goes right to this little area right here, and you'll come right through. So we're not going to change the timing of this pump either. We're just going to take that little lip down there, down, and clean it up. And then on this side here, we do the same thing. Not changing the timing. You just go to the machine surface, but basically you're just taking all that area right there, this little hump especially down right there. I don't change the diameter of this because there's really no room for that. But typically, if someone's going to be running an LA style or a Magnum style, instead of using this for a pickup, what I'll try to have them do is run one that comes off of this area right here. So the pickup will come off of this. That way you're not limited to this, because doing all these modifications, this pickup in here comes out to like 400 and something thousandths on the inside of the pickup. So like even the Mylodon. So you got to drill that out to 1/2 inch, and then it gets a little thin. So anyways, yep, we're going to start grinding this out, and I'll show you what it looks like. So this is kind of what you're going for, is just kind of rounding that edge right in there. Nothing crazy. Don't touch this right here because you'll go right through it. But you're just trying to round that in there. I just use a ball end. I hook up a shop vac, plug this up. I use the hole that I just drilled as a vacuum so it keeps some of the dust down. And just go ahead and do it like that. Now we're going to move on to this side here, and we're going to kind of do the exact same thing. We're going to take that, basically that flash right there, and then you see how they drill in that little edge right back in there. We're going to take that down, but that's really all we're going to do here, and then just round the top edge right there. It's really simple. This is we're not going crazy in here. So as you can see, I just took off that edge right there. Rounded that edge there. So once again, not trying to change timing, and I don't want to cut into that corner too much right in there. All I did was just open up that area, so that way just give it a better volume to fill. That's all I'm trying to do with this. So between that, and then we're going to smooth this out. I'm going to take this out here, but there's tricks that I do in here that I'm not going to show you. That's stuff I'm keeping secret. But I'm going to take this apart. and I do some things in here. And then I'm going to move on from there. And then we're going to put this back together and we're going to test it. We got to move on to the main. So there it is right there. Now remember, you drilled in here so that you're going to get a little bit of, when you're going down that hole, because you're making it bigger, you're going to get a little chamfer here. So just be careful of this, that it doesn't come to the edge here. But we're putting this, you know, this is going on a flat surface, and there's going to be a bolt here, and it's going to be just fine. But yeah, that's all you're trying to go is just kind of get that and then get that to curve in. That's all we're going for. On this one here, this is the main. We're doing a little port match on this, a little gasket match. What I'm going to come in here and do is I'm just going to use one of my long skinny bits. Come in here and clean this up, clean that up. Then I'll use the round ball to come in there and just knock down that edge. So this is kind of what it should look like. I just open it up so that way it goes into this area here. I have a piece of glass with sand paper on it. I got to get this flat. The pad on the oil pump is nice and flat because I don't use a gasket on this. I just use the gasket as a template. I just put some little bit of high tack on here and let the two sealing surfaces basically touch at that point. So anyways, yeah, this is kind of what you're going for. And this is about it right here. And yeah, this is done. We're going to put it all back together and we'll wrap it up. All right, oil pump's back together. I've packed it full of some grease. Make sure it gets a nice smooth pull. Easy turn. Easy turn. Really easy to turn. So there we go. It's all back together and I think we got everything. I'm going to put some WD-40 on this. It's already packed with grease. He's going to have some extra of these in case he has to take those lines off. I'm going to put these caps back on, and this is his bearings. Other than that, this sucker's a wrap. So there you go. This is how you do it. I've done this so many times. It's almost second nature. Here's an old list that I used to do of everything. And it's funny because my LOS is my level of suck. So yeah, that's all I got. This is it. It's done. It's going off to Brian. Next time you see this engine, go onto his channel, Dust Devil Garage. I'll put a link in there below. And he should start building this pretty soon. It's all right. You guys take it easy. Peace.